The Vraxian warship hung in the darkness of space like a metal insect waiting to strike. High Warlord Kethrix stood at the observation window. His forearms crossed behind his back, his compound eyes studied the blue and green world below. The humans called it New Geneva. Soon, they would call it nothing at all. Report, he clicked, his mandibles snapping together. The scans are complete, High Warlord. Commander Thexor stepped forward, his chitinous armor gleaming under the ship's cold lights. The population is approximately 4,000. They have basic defense systems. Nothing that can threaten our forces. Kethrix made a sound of amusement. It came out like stones grinding together. And the species itself? What do we know of these? Humans? Thexor pulled up the data on a floating screen. Images of humans appeared small. Soft creatures with smooth skin and rounded features. They had no claws. No natural armor. No venom glands. Their teeth were flat and useless for combat. They are weak, High Warlord. They require sleep for 1/3 of their existence. Their bodies break easily. They cannot survive in extreme temperatures. Their lifespan is less than a single Vraxian century. Thexor's voice dripped with contempt. They are prey animals who somehow learned to build ships. Kethrix studied the images. The humans looked back at him with their strange, forward-facing eyes. Predator eyes. Some distant part of his mind noted. But that made no sense. Everything else about them screamed weakness. How long will the conquest take? He asked. 3 rotations at most, perhaps less. The High Warlord turned away from the window. Begin the invasion. I want this finished before the next meal cycle. The dropships fell like metal rain upon New Geneva. The colony had been built in a valley surrounded by mountains. It was a peaceful place. Farms stretched across the lowlands. Children played in the streets of the small city. Scientists worked in research stations, studying the alien plant life. Families sat down to dinner, unaware that death was falling from the sky. The first explosions destroyed the defense grid. The second wave took out the communication towers. By the time the colonists understood what was happening, Vraxian soldiers were already in the streets. They were terrifying to behold. Each warrior stood over 8 feet tall. Their bodies were covered in black armor that grew from their own skin. They had 4 arms, 2 for fighting, 2 for grasping. Their faces were nightmares of sharp mandibles and clustered eyes that saw in every direction at once. The colonists ran. Some tried to fight. It made no difference. Thomas Chen was eating dinner with his family when the wall exploded inward. He threw himself over his daughter, trying to shield her with his body. A Vraxian soldier grabbed him by the throat and lifted him like he weighed nothing. Please, Thomas gasped. My daughter, she's just a child. The Vraxian did not understand the words. It would not have cared if it did. Thomas Chen died with his daughter's screams in his ears. Similar scenes played out across the colony. The Vraxians were efficient. They had done this countless times before. They moved through the streets in perfect formation, killing everything that moved. Resistance was punished. Surrender was ignored. By midnight, New Geneva was silent. High Warlord Kethrix walked through the burning ruins the next morning. Bodies lay in the streets. Buildings smoldered. The smell of death hung thick in the air. He felt nothing but satisfaction. Casualties? He asked. 3 warriors injured, none killed. The humans fought with farming tools and kitchen implements. Thexor could not hide his amusement. They truly are pathetic creatures. Kethrix kicked a human body with his armored foot. The corpse rolled over, revealing the face of a young woman. Her eyes were still open, staring at nothing. In death, she looked almost peaceful. Record a message, the High Warlord commanded. Broadcast it across the galactic network. Let everyone see what happens to those who stand against the Vraxian dominion. Unquote. The message went out an hour later. It showed the destruction of New Geneva in graphic detail. It showed Vraxian warriors standing over human corpses. And it ended with Kethrix himself, addressing the camera with cold confidence. The species known as humans is now under Vraxian control. Any who resist will share the fate of this colony. The soft prey of the galaxy should learn their place. The message was received on 10,000 worlds. Most species watched it with the tired acceptance of those who had seen such things before. The Vraxians were conquerors. This was what they did. But on Earth, the message was received differently. General Marcus Cole was in his office on Mars when the transmission arrived. He was a large man, weathered by age and war. His face was a map of old scars. His eyes had seen things that would break lesser men. He had fought in the Martian Rebellion. He had commanded forces during the Europa siege. He had buried more soldiers than he could count. He watched the footage in silence. He saw the bodies in the streets. He saw the burning buildings. And then he saw something that made his blood turn to ice, a close-up shot of the dead. Dozens of faces, captured almost accidentally by the Vraxian cameras. And there, in the corner of the frame, was a face he knew better than his own. Sarah, his daughter, his only child. She had gone to New Geneva 6 months ago to work in the agricultural research program. She had been so excited. "It's a new world, Dad," she had said. "A chance to build something beautiful." Now she lay dead in an alien street, killed by creatures who thought humans were too weak to matter. General Cole did not cry. He did not scream. He simply sat very still for a long moment, his hands flat on his desk. When he finally moved, it was to press a button on his communication console. "Connect me to all Legion commanders," he said. His voice was calm. Terribly calm. Priority 1. Within minutes, faces appeared on screens around the room. Men and women who had fought beside him for decades. Veterans of humanity's bloodiest wars. Soldiers who had seen hell and walked back out. "You've seen the footage?" Cole said. It was not a question. They had. Their faces were hard. Their eyes were cold. New Geneva is gone. 4,000 dead. "The Vraxians think we're weak. They think we're prey." Cole paused. "They're about to learn how wrong they are." "What are your orders, General?" asked Commander Rodriguez, her voice tight with controlled fury. Cole looked at the frozen image on his screen, his daughter's face among the dead. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of a promise. A threat. A declaration of war. Wake the wolves. Far across human space, in retirement homes and military bases, in quiet farms and busy cities, old soldiers received the call. They were men and women who had thought their fighting days were over. They had tried to forget the skills they had learned, the things they had done. Now they remembered. And somewhere in the darkness of space, the Vraxians celebrated their easy victory, completely unaware that they had just made the worst mistake in their species' history. They had given humanity a reason to fight. The training facility on Mars was built into the red rock itself. It stretched for miles underground, a maze of corridors, barracks, and combat simulation rooms. For 3 weeks, it had been filling with soldiers. Sergeant Elena Vasquez stood in the weapons bay, checking her rifle for the 100th time. She was 34 years old, with short black hair and a scar that ran from her left eyebrow to her jaw. The scar was a gift from Titan, where she had lost her entire squad to rebel fighters. She had spent 2 years trying to forget that day. Now she was preparing to make new memories just as bloody. "You're going to wear out the barrel if you keep checking it like that." She looked up to find a young man watching her. He wore lieutenant's bars on his collar and had the look of someone who had spent more time in classrooms than battlefields. "Lieutenant Okafor, right?" she said. "The tactical genius. That's what they tell me." He offered his hand. "Joran Okafor. I've read your file, Sergeant. Titan was a mess. You shouldn't have survived. I shouldn't have done a lot of things." She shook his hand briefly, then went back to her rifle. "You ever killed anyone, Lieutenant?" "No." "Then you might want to save the analysis until after your first battle. Everything looks different when there's blood on your hands." Okafor did not take offense. Instead, he sat down beside her and pulled out a data pad. "I've been studying the Vraxians. Want to hear what I found?" Despite herself, Vasquez was curious. "Go ahead." "They're strong, much stronger than us. Their armor can stop most standard weapons. They're fast, they work together perfectly, and they've never lost a war in 300 years. Okafor paused. But they have weaknesses. Such as? Their compound eyes give them wide vision, but they struggle with depth perception and they're nearly blind in low light. Their communication depends on chemical signals. They literally smell each other's orders, disrupt those signals, and they lose coordination. And most importantly, he pulled up an image of a Vraxian warrior. They've never fought humans before. 8. Vasquez looked at him. Why does that matter? Because they don't know what we're capable of. They looked at our bodies and saw weakness. They didn't look at our history. Okafor's voice grew serious. Sergeant, in the last 500 years, humans have killed more humans than every other species in the galaxy has killed combined. We've turned warfare into an art form. We've developed weapons that make the Vraxians' technology look primitive. And we did it all while fighting each other. Imagine what happens when we all fight together, against a common enemy. For the first time in weeks, Vasquez felt something other than grief and anger. She felt hope. Above them, in the command center, General Cole was meeting with alien ambassadors. They had come from the Galactic Concord, the alliance of 200 species that supposedly governed the galaxy. In truth, the Concord did little but talk. Ambassador Yithra was the oldest among them. She belonged to a species called the Esthani, tall, slender beings with silver skin and eyes that held thousands of years of memory. She had watched empires rise and fall. She had seen countless wars. General Cole, she said, her voice like wind through crystal. The Concord urges you to reconsider. The Vraxians are undefeated. They have crushed species far more powerful than humanity. Resistance will only lead to more death. What do you suggest? Cole asked. Accept tributary status. Pay them tribute. Offer soldiers for their armies. It is how things are done. Cole was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft but firm. Ambassador, I've spent my whole life fighting. I've buried friends. I've made choices that keep me awake at night. I've done terrible things in service of my people. He looked at the gathered ambassadors, beings from a dozen different worlds, all watching him with expressions of pity and concern. My daughter was on New Geneva. She was a scientist. She wanted to grow food that could feed billions. She believed in a future where humans and aliens worked together in peace. His hands tightened into fists. They killed her like she was nothing. They broadcast her body across the galaxy as a warning. General, no. Cole's voice cut through the room like a blade. You don't understand us. None of you do. You look at humans and see small, fragile creatures with short lives. You see a species that should be easy to conquer. He stood up, and despite being shorter than every alien in the room, he somehow seemed larger than all of them. But we didn't survive this long by being easy to conquer. We survived because when something tries to kill us, we kill it back. When something takes what we love, we make it regret ever being born. The Vraxians want a war? We'll give them a war they'll remember for the rest of their very short history. The ambassadors exchanged uneasy glances, all except Yithra, who studied Cole with ancient, knowing eyes. She had seen this before, this fire in a species that had been pushed too far. She had seen what happened next. She said nothing. But as she left the meeting, she made a decision of her own. In the weeks that followed, soldiers poured into Mars from every human world. They came from Earth and Luna, from the colonies on Europa and Titan, from distant outposts that had never seen the sun. They were young and old, men and women, people of every background united by a single purpose. The training was brutal. They learned Vraxian anatomy where the armor was thin, where the vital organs hid, how to kill a creature twice their size. They practiced fighting in darkness, where human eyes could adapt but Vraxian eyes could not. They studied the enemy's tactics and developed counters for every one. But what disturbed the alien observers most was not the training. It was the attitude. A Concord observer named Trixall watched the humans with growing confusion. They were preparing for a war they could not win against an enemy that had never known defeat. They should be terrified. They should be desperate. Instead, they were singing. The songs drifted through the corridors, old songs, from Earth's bloody past. Songs about battles fought and friends lost. Songs about standing firm when all hope was gone. Songs about death and glory, and the strange joy of fighting alongside brothers and sisters who would die for you without hesitation. Trixel approached Sergeant Vasquez one evening. "I do not understand," he admitted. "You are preparing for probable death. Why do you seem happy?" Vasquez thought about it for a moment. "Because we're not alone anymore. For years, we've been living in peace, trying to forget what we are. But deep down, every human knows the truth. We're fighters. We've always been fighters. And there's something," she struggled to find the words, "there's something pure about fighting for something that matters, about standing with people who would die for you, but you will likely lose. Maybe. But we'll make them bleed for every inch. And even if we fall, they'll remember us. They'll remember that humans don't go quietly, that we don't surrender, that we don't stop." She smiled a hard, fierce smile. "That's worth something. That's worth everything." Trixel backed away slowly. He had studied humans from a distance. He had thought he understood them. Now he realized he had understood nothing. The day came when the fleet was ready. Thousands of ships hung in orbit around Mars, warships and transports, fighters and bombers. Aboard them were soldiers who had trained until their bodies screamed. They had said goodbye to families they might never see again. They had made peace with death. General Cole stood before them, his image broadcast to every ship. Behind him, the stars stretched into infinity. "They think we're weak," he said. "They look at our soft skin and our short lives, and they see prey. They don't see the truth." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "The truth is that we spent 10,000 years killing each other just to get good at it. We've survived ice ages and plagues and wars that burned whole continents. We've stared into the darkness and refused to blink. We are not prey. We are the thing that prey becomes when it stops running and starts fighting back." The soldiers listened. Their hearts beat faster. Their hands tightened on their weapons. "Today we show the Vraxians what weak looks like. Today, we make them understand that they should have left us alone." He raised his fist. "For New Geneva. For Earth. For every human who ever lived and died fighting for something that mattered." And across the fleet, thousands of voices answered as one. "For humanity. For humanity." The ships began to move, carrying their cargo of wolves toward the stars. The hunt had begun. Varaxis Prime was a dead world, a rock of black stone and toxic air that the Vraxians had turned into a fortress. Thousands of warriors waited there, preparing for the next phase of the conquest. They expected to spend months gathering strength before pushing deeper into human space. They never got the chance. The first warning came at midnight, local time. A technician noticed something strange on his sensor display, small objects falling through the atmosphere. He assumed they were meteors. Varaxis Prime had many meteors. Then the meteors started to slow down. "Alert!" he screamed into his communicator. "Unknown contacts incoming. They're not meteors, they're..." The drop pods hit the ground like fists from an angry god. Sergeant Vasquez felt her teeth rattle as her pods slammed into the rocky surface. The impact would have killed most species. Humans had learned to survive it through a combination of specialized suits, liquid suspension systems, and a simple willingness to accept broken bones as a reasonable price for surprise. She kicked open the pod door and rolled out into darkness. Her night vision activated automatically, painting the world in shades of green. Around her, other pods were opening. Soldiers emerged, weapons ready, moving without a word. The Vraxians had built their base in a valley. They had fortified the obvious approaches, the mountain passes, the open plains. They had not expected anyone to drop directly into the valley floor, because the valley floor was a maze of unstable tunnels and sharp rock formations. But humans had mapped those tunnels. 3 months ago, before the war even started, survey drones had slipped through Vraxian space and studied every inch of this world. The Vraxians had detected the drones and destroyed them. They had not bothered to wonder what the drones had been looking for. "Alpha Team, move," Vasquez whispered into her comm. "Stay quiet. Stay low. Kill anything that sees us. They moved through the darkness like ghosts. 12 soldiers, each carrying enough weapons to level a building. Their footsteps made no sound. Their breathing was controlled, silent. They had trained for this exact scenario 100 times. The first Vraxian sentry never knew what hit him. One moment he was standing guard at a tunnel entrance. The next, a blade was sliding through the gap in his neck armor. He died without making a sound. One by one, the sentries fell. By the time the Vraxians realized something was wrong, Alpha Team was already inside the base. Above them, a very different battle was unfolding. Lieutenant Okafor stood on the bridge of the command ship, watching the tactical display. The plan was working perfectly, almost too perfectly. Enemy forces are responding to the feint, reported his tactical officer. They're pulling defenders from the eastern perimeter to reinforce the western approach. Good, signal the third wave. Tell them to hit the eastern perimeter in exactly 4 minutes. The Vraxians were warriors, not strategists. They responded to threats directly if something attacked from the west. They sent forces west. They did not think about why an enemy might attack from a direction where victory was impossible. Humans understood such things. Humans had invented such things. On the ground, the Vraxian commander, named Deathcar, was growing frustrated. His warriors had rushed to meet the human attack on the western front, but the humans kept retreating. They would fire a few shots, fall back, fire again, fall back again. It was cowardly. It was beneath contempt. Press forward, he commanded. Crush them against the mountains. His warriors obeyed. They pushed deeper into the rocky terrain, eager for a real fight. They did not notice the small devices scattered among the rocks. They did not notice the way the humans were herding them into a specific location. Then the mines went off. The explosion turned the night into day. Rocks flew like missiles. Vraxian warriors were thrown through the air, their armor cracked, their bodies broken. Those who survived the initial blast found themselves surrounded by walls of fire and stone, and through the fire came the humans. Deathcar watched in horror as small figures emerged from the flames. Their armor was scorched. Some of them were clearly wounded, limping, bleeding, missing pieces of equipment. But they kept coming. They fired as they advanced, every shot precise, every movement coordinated. Impossible, he breathed. The heat alone should have killed them, but humans were used to heat. Humans had evolved on a world where temperatures could swing from deadly cold to killing heat within a single day. They had survived ice ages and volcanic winters and summers so hot that rivers turned to dust. A Vraxian warrior was not just hot. A Vraxian warrior could be killed. The battle became a slaughter. The Vraxians, trapped in the killing field, fought with desperate fury. They were stronger than the humans. In close combat, a single Vraxian could tear a human apart, but the humans did not fight fair. They fought in teams, two drawing attention while a third flanked. They used their smaller size to slip through gaps in the Vraxian lines. When they were grabbed, they triggered grenades strapped to their own bodies, taking their enemies with them into death. Deathcar saw a human soldier get impaled on a Vraxian's claw. The soldier should have died. Instead, she grabbed the claw with both hands, pulled herself closer, and fired her pistol directly into the Vraxian's eye cluster. They fell together, both dead, locked in a final embrace. "What are these creatures?" Deathcar whispered. His answer came from the darkness behind him, a knife across his throat, wielded by a scarred woman with eyes like cold fire. "We're human," Vasquez said as he fell. "Remember that." By dawn, the base was burning. Vasquez sat on a rock and watched the flames. Her armor was cracked. 3 of her ribs were broken. She had a gash on her arm that would need stitches, and a burn on her leg that would leave a scar. But she was alive. Around her, medics moved through the battlefield, sorting the wounded from the dead. The numbers were bad. They had lost 40% of their force. 4 out of every 10 soldiers who had dropped from the sky would never go home. But the Vraxians had lost everything. Lieutenant Okafor found her as the sun rose. He looked pale and shaky, the aftermath of watching hundreds of people die on his tactical display. Reading about war in books was not the same as watching it happen. "We won," he said quietly. This time, Vasquez did not take her eyes off the flames. "This was one base. They have 100 more. They have a fleet that could darken the sky over Earth. I know, but we proved something today." In the ruins of the base, they found a Vraxian commander who was still alive. His legs were crushed, his armor shattered, but his eyes still burned with hatred. When he saw the humans approaching, "Kill me," he rasped. "Finish it." General Cole, who had landed with the second wave, shook his head. "No. You're going to send a message to your people. I will tell them nothing. You'll tell them the truth." Cole crouched down to meet the Vraxian's eyes. "You'll tell them what happened here. You'll tell them that 4,000 humans defeated 10,000 Vraxians. You'll tell them that we don't give up. We don't surrender. And we don't forgive." The Vraxian stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, something changed in his eyes. Not respect. Vraxians did not respect prey. But something else. Something very close to fear. "Your species is insane," he said. "Maybe. But we're insane in a way that wins wars." Cole stood up. "Send the message. Tell your High Warlord that we're coming. Tell him to gather every ship and every soldier he has. Tell him we'll be waiting." The message was sent that same day. It spread through the Vraxian network like poison through blood. For the first time in 3 centuries, the undefeated warriors of the Dominion began to feel something they had not felt since they were young and weak. They felt afraid, but High Warlord Kethrix was not afraid. He was furious. He had underestimated these creatures once. He would not make that mistake again. He began gathering the Grand Armada, every ship, every warrior, every weapon the Dominion possessed. He would crush these humans personally. He would make them suffer in ways they could not imagine. And across the galaxy, other species watched and waited, wondering what would happen when an unstoppable force met an enemy that simply refused to stop. The news of Varaxis Prime spread across the galaxy like wildfire. In trading stations and diplomatic halls, on warships and colony worlds, beings of 100 different species watched the footage with disbelief. The Vraxians, the undefeated conquerors who had crushed empires and enslaved billions, had been beaten by a species most of them had never heard of, beaten by creatures that looked like they would break if you squeezed them too hard. On the Vraxian homeworld of Chethra, High Warlord Kethrix watched the same footage in his war chamber. His 4 fists were clenched so tight that his claws drew blood from his own palms. Around him, his advisors stood in terrified silence, waiting for the explosion. "How?" he said quietly. Too quietly. "The humans used unconventional tactics, High Warlord. They attacked at night. They used explosives to create confusion. I know what they did." Kethrix spun around, his eyes blazing. "I want to know how 10,000 of our warriors, the finest soldiers in the galaxy, were slaughtered by creatures half their size who cannot even survive a cold night without artificial help." No one had an answer. In truth, no one understood. The Vraxians had fought dozens of species. They had developed strategies for every known form of combat, but they had never fought anything like humans. Humans who kept fighting after being wounded. Humans who used their own deaths as weapons. Humans who moved through darkness like they had been born in it. "Summon the Grand Armada," Kethrix commanded. "Every ship, every warrior, every weapon we possess. High Warlord, that will leave our other territories undefended." "I do not care about our other territories." Kethrix's roar echoed through the chamber. "These humans have humiliated us before the entire galaxy. They have made us look weak. If we do not crush them completely, other species will begin to question our power. Our empire will crumble from within." He turned back to the screen, where the burning wreckage of the Varaxis base still smoldered. "We will not merely defeat them. We will exterminate them. We will burn their worlds and salt their soil. We will erase every trace of their existence from the universe. And when the galaxy asks what happened to the humans, we will tell them, this is what happens to prey that forgets its place." Far away, on a ship hidden in the darkness between stars, Ambassador Yithra made a decision. She was old, older than most species could comprehend. Her kind, the Astani, lived for thousands of years. They had watched the rise and fall of 100 empires. They had learned long ago that the galaxy was not changed by the strong. It was changed by the survivors, and she recognized what she saw in the humans. The communication was risky. If the Vraxians discovered that she was helping their enemy, they would destroy her entire species. But Yithra had not lived for 3,000 years by being afraid of risks. General Cole's face appeared on her screen. Tired, but alert. Ambassador. This is unexpected. I will be brief, General. I am transmitting star charts, the locations of Vraxian supply lines, fleet movements, defensive positions. Everything my people have gathered over the past 2 centuries. Cole's eyes widened. Why? Because the galaxy needs to change. Yithra's voice was soft but firm. The Vraxians have crushed every species that tried to resist them. They have created a galaxy ruled by fear. But fear only works if everyone is afraid. And we're not afraid? No, General. You are terrified. I can see it in your eyes. But you fight anyway. That is something the Vraxians do not understand. That is something the galaxy has not seen in a very long time. She paused, gathering her thoughts. We have watched conquerors rise and fall for eons. We have seen countless species burn bright and then fade into extinction. But the ones who survive, the ones who shape history, are never the strongest. They are the ones who refuse to quit. You are survivors, General Cole. The galaxy needs survivors. Cole studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Thank you, Ambassador. We won't waste this gift. I know you won't. Yithra allowed herself a small smile. Now go. Make them regret ever hearing the name humanity. The information from Yithra changed everything. Suddenly, the humans knew where the Vraxians were weak. They knew which supply lines could be cut, which fleets were undermanned, which commanders were overconfident. But the war was not just being fought in space. It was being fought in hearts and minds as well. Sergeant Vasquez found herself struggling. The Battle of Varaxis Prime had been a victory, but it had cost her. The faces of the dead haunted her dreams, both the humans who had fallen beside her and the Vraxians she had killed with her own hands. She was cleaning her knife one evening when she heard movement behind her. She spun, blade raised, and found herself face to face with a Vraxian. He was young, barely more than a juvenile by their standards. He had been captured in a raid 3 days ago and was being held for interrogation. Somehow, he had escaped his cell, but instead of trying to flee or fight, he was simply standing there, looking at her. Go ahead, he said in broken human speech. Vasquez did not lower her knife. How do you know our language? Learned. In cell. Your guards talk much. He tilted his head, a Vraxian gesture of confusion. You are soldier who led attack on base. Killed many of my people. Why do you look sad? It was such a strange question that Vasquez actually laughed. Because killing isn't something to be happy about. Even when it's necessary. Vraxians are happy to kill, is glory, is honor. And how's that working out for you? The young Vraxian was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he sat down on the floor. On my world, we are taught that strength is everything. That the strong rule and the weak serve. That there is no other way. There are other ways. Vasquez finally lowered her knife. Most species in the galaxy live in peace. They build things instead of destroying them. They create instead of killing. But you kill. You are very good at killing. Yes. Because we had to be. Because for most of our history, the most dangerous thing on our planet was us. She sat down across from him, keeping her knife within reach. We killed each other for thousands of years. We got very, very good at it. But we also learned something else. We learned that killing is easy. Building is hard. And the things that matter most, love, family, hope, Can't be taken by force. The young Vraxian considered this. If my people lose this war, we will be destroyed. Maybe. Or maybe you'll learn that there's more to existence than conquest. She stood up and offered him her hand. He looked at it in confusion. It's a gesture of friendship, she explained. Or at least a truce. Come on, I'll take you back to your cell before someone less friendly finds you. He took her hand. His grip was strong enough to crush her bones, but he held it gently, carefully. You are strange creatures, he said. You have no idea. Elsewhere, Lieutenant Okafor was facing his own crisis. The tactical data from Ambassador Yithra had revealed an opportunity, a strike that could cripple the Vraxian fleet before it reached human space. But the target was a shipyard built over a civilian colony. Millions of Vraxians lived there, most of them workers and families who had nothing to do with the war. If we hit it now, we end this war in months instead of years, argued Commander Rodriguez during the strategy meeting. Every day we wait, more humans die. If we hit it now, we become exactly what they think we are. Okafor replied. Monsters. Killers who slaughter innocent people to achieve our goals. They slaughtered New Geneva without a second thought. And if we do the same thing, what makes us different? The room fell silent. General Cole sat at the head of the table, his face unreadable. Lieutenant Okafor, he said finally. What do you recommend? Okafor took a deep breath. We take the hard path. We find another way to win, one that doesn't require us to become the enemy. It will take longer. It will cost more lives. But when this war is over, we'll still be able to look at ourselves in the mirror. Cole nodded slowly. Then that's what we'll do. We're fighting to prove that humanity deserves a place in the galaxy. If we lose our humanity to win the war, we've lost everything. The decision was made. The shipyard would be spared. Humanity would fight, but they would fight on their own terms. 3 weeks later, the Grand Armada entered human space. 10,000 ships. Millions of warriors. The largest military force the Vraxians had ever assembled. Commanded by High Warlord Kethrix himself, they came like a tide of metal and death, ready to drown humanity in blood. General Cole watched them approach on the long-range sensors. The fleet stretched across thousands of miles of space, so vast that it seemed to block out the stars themselves. That's a lot of ships, Vasquez said quietly. Yes. Cole smiled a thin, hard smile that did not reach his eyes. But they're coming to us. They're fighting in our territory. By our rules. Against an enemy they still don't understand. He turned to face his commanders, men and women who had followed him through hell and were ready to follow him again. They think this is the end. They think they're coming to finish us off. His voice carried through the room, calm and steady. They don't know that we've been preparing for this fight since we first looked up at the stars and wondered what might want to kill us. He looked out the viewport, toward the distant lights of the approaching armada. This is where we show them what humanity really is. This is where we make them understand that some things, some people, are not meant to be conquered. The final battle was about to begin. Saturn's rings stretched across the void like a frozen river of light. For billions of years, they had circled the gas giant in silent beauty, untouched by the petty conflicts of living things. Now they were about to become the backdrop for the greatest battle in human history. High Warlord Kethrix stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, watching the human fleet take position. They were outnumbered at least 5-1. Their ships were smaller, weaker, built by a species that had only been traveling between stars for a few centuries. By every measure that mattered, this battle was already over. And yet, there was something wrong. The humans were not fleeing. They were not begging for mercy. They were not even trying to hide. Instead, they had formed a line in front of Saturn's rings and simply waited. High Warlord, the prey has stopped moving, reported his tactical officer. I can see that. Kethrix's mandibles clicked with irritation. What are they doing? Unknown. Our scans show no unusual weapons. No hidden reinforcements. They simply appear to be ready. The word echoed in Kethrix's mind. On Varaxis Prime, the humans had been ready. They had turned a simple base assault into a massacre. They had made his warriors look like fools. Not this time. All ships, advance. Standard conquest formation. We end this now. The Grand Armada surged forward, 10,000 ships moving as one. They were beautiful in their destruction, a wave of metal and fire that had crushed a dozen civilizations. Against them, the human fleet looked like children's toys. General Cole watched them come. His heart was steady. His mind was clear. This was the moment everything had been building toward, not just the war, but his entire life. Every battle he had fought, every friend he had buried, every hard choice he had made, had led to this point. "Weapons ready," he commanded. "Weapons ready, sir. Bring us forward. Make them think we're meeting them head-on." The human fleet advanced, closing the distance. The Vraxians spread out, preparing to surround them. It was a classic conquest maneuver: encircle the enemy, crush them from all sides. It had worked 1,000 times before. At 10,000 kilometers, Cole gave the order. "Execute Plan Omega. All ships, scatter." The human fleet exploded outward in every direction. Ships dove toward the rings, toward Saturn's moons, toward the asteroid fields that humans had spent decades quietly filling with weapons. The Vraxians, expecting a direct confrontation, found themselves chasing shadows. "What is this?" Kethrix demanded. "They're running?" "No, High Warlord. The first mines went off. The asteroid fields, which Vraxian scouts had dismissed as natural debris, were filled with weapons. Missiles launched from hidden platforms. Energy beams stabbed out from hollowed-out rocks. Ships that looked like civilian freighters opened fire with military-grade weapons. The Vraxians had expected a battle. They got an ambush. The outer edges of the Grand Armada dissolved into chaos. Ships exploded. Formations broke apart. Warriors who had never known defeat found themselves dying in the cold darkness of space, killed by enemies they could not even see. "All ships, pull back," Kethrix screamed. "Regroup at rally point. High Warlord, the humans are in the rings." Kethrix's blood went cold. Saturn's rings were dense with ice and rock. Navigating them was dangerous even at slow speeds. No sane commander would take a fleet into that maze, but the humans were not sane. They were desperate and frightened and absolutely determined to win. Through the rings, small human ships darted between ice chunks the size of mountains. They knew every path, every gap, every hiding spot. They had mapped this region in secret over decades, preparing for a day they hoped would never come. Now that day was here, and they were ready. Sergeant Vasquez was aboard one of those ships. Her boarding team waited in the cargo bay, weapons ready, faces grim. They had one job: get aboard the flagship and kill the High Warlord. 30 seconds to contact, the pilot called back. "This is going to be rough." Vasquez checked her rifle one more time. Her hands were steady, her heart was calm. She had been afraid before the battle started. Now there was no room for fear. There was only the mission. The ship burst out of the rings directly above the Eternal Conquest. Defensive weapons fired. But the human ship was small and fast, and the Vraxian gunners were distracted by the chaos around them. The pilot dove toward the flagship's hull, aimed for a specific section, and, impact, the boarding pod punched through the outer hull and lodged in the corridor beyond. Vasquez was moving before the smoke cleared, her team behind her. They met the first Vraxian guards in seconds. The fight was brutal and short. Humans died. Vraxians died. Blood of both colors splashed the walls. But the humans kept moving, kept advancing, kept killing. They had trained for this. They had sacrificed everything for this. Vasquez reached the bridge doors. Behind her, only 3 of her team remained standing. Ahead, she could hear Vraxian voices screaming orders. "Breach on my mark," she said. "Whatever happens, we finish this." The doors blew inward. High Warlord Kethrix spun around as the humans stormed onto his bridge. He had expected this moment, eventually expected some final, desperate attack. He had prepared for it. He drew his ceremonial blade, a weapon that had killed 30 enemies in personal combat. He was larger than these creatures. Stronger. Faster. He would end this himself. The first human came at him with a rifle. He cut her down with a single stroke. The second fired at him. His armor absorbed the shots. And he killed that one too. The third tried to flank him, and he crushed the man's skull with his fist. Then there was only one human left. The one with the scar. The one who had killed Deathcar on Varaxis Prime. You, Ketherick said. I know you. Good. Vasquez dropped her rifle, it was empty anyway, and drew her knife. Then you know how this ends. They fought. Ketherick's was everything a Vraxian warrior should be. 8 feet of armored muscle, 4 arms, centuries of combat experience. He was faster than he looked. Precise. Deadly. His blade moved in patterns that had killed warriors from a dozen species. Vasquez was small, soft, fragile. She was bleeding from half a dozen wounds. She was exhausted, running on nothing but adrenaline and rage. But she was also human. She did not fight fair. She used the debris on the bridge floor as weapons. She threw herself under his strikes instead of trying to block them. When he grabbed her arm, she dislocated her own shoulder to slip free. When he knocked her down, she rolled into his legs instead of retreating. Ketherick's had never fought anything like this. His enemies had always played by the rules: strike, block, retreat, advance. This creature had no rules. She was chaos wrapped in skin, willing to break herself if it meant getting close enough to hurt him. He made a mistake. A small one, a fraction of a second too slow in pulling back his blade. Vasquez was inside his guard before he could recover. Her knife found the gap in his neck armor. The same gap she had used on Deathcar. The blade went in. And in. And in. High Warlord Ketherick's, undefeated conqueror of 100 worlds, fell to his knees. He looked at the small human woman standing over him. Her face covered in blood, his blood, and hers. Impossible, he whispered. No, Vasquez said. Just human. She pulled the knife free. He fell. Outside, the battle had turned. With their flagship crippled and their warlord dead, the Vraxian fleet began to break apart. Some ships tried to flee. Others surrendered. Still others fought to the death, unable to accept what was happening. By the time Saturn's sun rose over the rings, it was over. The Grand Armada, the greatest military force the galaxy had ever seen, was destroyed. Thousands of Vraxian ships drifted dead in space. Millions of warriors who had thought themselves invincible would never return home. Humanity had won. 3 months later, the Galactic Concord formally recognized humanity as a sovereign power. Other species began to study human history, hoping to understand how such fragile creatures had defeated the undefeatable. What they found terrified them. Humans had fought world wars that killed millions. They had invented weapons that could destroy entire cities. They had practiced violence on a scale that made the Vraxians look like amateurs. And through it all, through ice ages and plagues and horrors beyond counting, they had refused to die. Ambassador Yithra met with General Cole one final time, on a station orbiting Earth. She looked out at the blue planet below. The cradle of humanity. I have watched species rise and fall for 3,000 years, she said. I have seen empires that spanned galaxies. I have seen warriors who laughed at death. But I have never seen anything like your people. Is that a compliment? Cole asked. I'm not sure. She turned to face him. You are violent. You are aggressive. You carry darkness inside you that frightens even the most warlike species. But you also carry something else. A fire that refuses to go out. A stubborn, irrational belief that you can survive anything if you fight hard enough. We call it hope, perhaps. Or perhaps it is something else entirely. She was quiet for a moment. The galaxy will be watching you now. They will be afraid. Some will try to destroy you before you become too powerful. Let them try. Cole's voice was not boastful. It was simply certain. We've survived worse. Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of Luna Station, watching Earth rise over the moon's horizon. The war was over. The dead were being mourned. The living were trying to figure out what came next. She thought about the young Vraxian she had spared, now working as a translator in the peace negotiations. She thought about Lieutenant Okafor, who had become one of the most respected strategists in the fleet. She thought about all the soldiers who had not made it home. General Cole found her there, as Earth filled the view screen with brilliant blue light. "Penny for your thoughts, Sergeant? Just thinking about the future." She did not take her eyes off the planet below. "Do you think there will be more wars?" "Probably. There always are. The galaxy is vast and full of things that want to hurt us." Cole moved to stand beside her. "But now they know what we are. Now they know what it costs to try. And what are we, sir? What did this war prove about humanity?" Cole considered the question for a long moment. When he answered, his voice was soft but strong. "It proved that we're afraid. We've always been afraid of the dark, of predators, of each other, of the unknown. But somewhere along the way, we learned that fear doesn't make you weak, it makes you dangerous. Every monster that ever hunted us, we ate them. Every plague that tried to kill us, we cured it. Every empire that tried to enslave us, we outlasted it." He looked at the Earth, the world that had made them who they were. The Vraxians looked at us and saw soft skin and short lives. They saw prey. They didn't see what those things cost us to survive. They didn't see the fire underneath. Vasquez nodded slowly. The war was over, but the story was just beginning. Humanity had proven itself among the stars. They had shown the galaxy that some things, some people, could not be conquered. In the years to come, there would be other challenges, other enemies, other battles to fight, and sacrifices to make. But humanity would face them the same way they had always faced everything. Together, afraid, and absolutely determined to survive. They were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the oldest, or the wisest, or the most advanced. But they were survivors. They were fighters. They were human, and that was enough. Far across the galaxy, in meeting halls and war rooms, other species were learning a new phrase. They whispered it to each other in fear and wonder. They taught it to their children as a warning: never threaten a human. Never harm what they love. Never mistake their kindness for weakness. Because when you push them far enough, when you take everything they have to lose, they will come for you. And they will not stop until you are gone. They are humanity, and they are never alone.